Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular November 5th meeting of the Stanley County Board of Commissioners. I appreciate everyone being here tonight. Commissioner Eford is going to lead us in the invocation, and afterwards, if you would, join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you would bow with me in a word of prayer. Our dear gracious Heavenly Father, we humbly come to you tonight thanking you for this day. And Lord, we just thank you for the county that we live in. Lord, we pray for strength and wisdom as we make decisions for this county. And Lord, I continue to pray for our military and their families for the sacrifices they make. And Lord, I especially pray for our police, our firemen, our EMS workers that serve daily. You'll just be with them, Lord. And I pray for the upcoming Veterans Day. Lord, be with all the veterans out there who serve this country greatly, Lord. And we pray that you again be with us and keep us safe, and everything that we say and do be honor and glory to you. These things we ask in your precious name that I pray. Amen. If y'all would join me for the pledge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Eford. Commissioners, you all have the agenda in front of you this evening. Are there, do we have an approval or any adjustments?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the agenda as presented.
Got a motion from Commissioner Eford, second from Vice Chairman McIntyre. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item 1, proclamation honoring Stanley County. And our presenter is Jim Prosser, interim COG director.
Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Jim Prosser. I am the Executive Director for Central Illini Council of Governments, and I'm here tonight to thank you for your support and participation with the Central Illini Council of Governments. We all know that the business of government is quality of life, but to support that quality of life, we have to make sure that we stay focused on growing jobs and growing the economy. That's the fuel for quality of life. And your county has been particularly adept at identifying those strategies that are critical to succeed in those areas. We know in the role that we play at Central Illini is that there are some parts, some strategies, economic development, workforce development, transportation, aging programs. Some of those programs don't start and stop at county borders. They are regional, and our job is to help identify with you as partners those strategies and systems that are critical to help you succeed in growing jobs in the economy and supporting quality of life within your communities. In 1968, we were established, and Stanley County at that time was one of our founding members, and you are today. And your leadership has played a key role in our continued success. That leadership included, when I first got on board, Commissioner Donovan, and it includes today Bill Lawhon, who serves as our treasurer and plays a very significant role as part of our leadership. We appreciate that very much. I especially want to make sure that your residents understand the expertise that they have at hand here. Your county is especially laser focused on understanding those systems that are critical to the success of job growth and economic growth. They stay on us to make sure that we're delivering for you those systems and strategies that are critical to your success. And I especially want to call out your county manager, Andy Lucas. I've had the opportunity over 40 years of working in the public sector to meet a lot of county and city managers, and I will tell you, you have one of the best in the country. Andy, again, knows the systems that are critical to success. He pays attention to those, is very demanding in an appropriate way of us to make sure that you get what you need from a county standpoint, but also is very compassionate about the needs of the people that live within the county. And that's an important, that combination of expertise but also compassion is critical. So if I might, I would like to just read to you the proclamation and then present it to you. Whereas Stanley County, North Carolina is known as a close-knit, caring, and welcoming community with a rich heritage. And whereas Stanley County's charm resides in its historic small towns, breathtaking natural surroundings, and abundant recreation amenities, and whereas Stanley County has experienced steady growth in population over the past several decades and now is home to over 61,000 people, and whereas local leaders have worked together to position Stanley County for future growth and prosperity, making it home to many major employers, including Michelin, Atrium Health, International Automotive Components, Perform Line Products, and Fibron. And whereas in 1968, Stanley County became a charter member of Central Iowa Council of Governments, an organization that works to help communities grow jobs and economy, control cost of government, and improve quality of life. Whereas Stanley County and Central Iowa have worked together to support seniors through regional ombudsman program and address growth-related needs through comprehensive economic development strategies and Connect Our Future project. And whereas Central Iowa Workforce Development Board, Stanley County School, Stanley County Community College, Stanley County Chamber of Commerce, and Stanley County Economic Development Commission developed Career Academy for Educators, CAFE, to link education and business together to have a talent pipeline for businesses within the county. And whereas Central Iowa is proud to have Stanley County as a valued member and looks forward to continuing to partner with the county in addressing the community's need in the future. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Central Iowa Council of Governments dedicates this month of November 2018 to honor Stanley County, North Carolina for its successes over the years and collaborative work with the Central Iowa region. Thank you very much. And if I might approach, I'd like to present this to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Prosser, for that presentation. Item 2, thank you for your service proclamation. Presenter Suzanne Louder, our Register of Deeds. Good evening, Suzanne.
Good evening. Hope you're doing well, all. I'm here to present you a proclamation for thank you for your service. In conjunction with this program, we also raise money for the Stanley County Veteran Relief Fund, holding silent auctions and raffles. The proclamation reads, whereas the Stanley County Register of Deeds encourages all veterans to record their active duty discharges, DD Form 214, and in return, the Register of Deeds will issue a Veteran Thank You for Your Service photo ID card that allows the veteran to receive discounts, free services, or incentives from participating Stanley County businesses. And whereas the Stanley County Commissioners encourages business to participate in this program as a means of showing their continued support and appreciation for our local veterans for their sacrifices they made on our behalf. Now, therefore, I am requesting that the Stanley County Commissioners do hereby proclaim Wednesday, November 14th, 2018, as Thank You for Your Service Day, and encourage all citizens and business to join in the celebration thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Swain?
move to accept the proclamation as presented.
Got a motion from Commissioner Swain,
Second.
second from Vice Chairman McIntyre. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, Suzanne, for all your hard work. Item 3, Senior Services Home Care and Community Block Grant Board Appointments. Presenter Becky Weemhoff, our Senior Services Director. Good evening, Becky.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm here tonight to ask for your approval for two names for our Home and Community Care Block Grant Board. The HCCBG Board, as we refer that to, is made up of federal and state funds, and they have the responsibility of receiving and discussing how they want to distribute this money into the 5 aging programs in our department. The board is made up of county staff, which includes the health director, who's also the human service director, the DSS director or assistant human service director, transportation director, and then the rest are made up of citizens in the county. And we try to get a good representation from all parts of the county on that board as well. We have 2 vacancies on that board. And so I'm submitting to you tonight 2 names that we would like for you to approve. The first name is Mr. Calvin Gaddy. He lives in New London and recently retired as the New London mayor for 14 years. Previous to that, he was the administrator for Oasis Shriners. The second name is Dwight Smith. He lives in Norwood, was a retail business owner for 40 years, and retired as the town administrator of Norwood. This would fill the 2 vacancies that we have on our board.
Thank you, Becky. It's a pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lawhon?
I would like to make a motion that Calvin Gaddy and Dwight Smith be appointed to the Home and Community Health Care Block Grant Board.
Got a motion from Commissioner Lawhon. Does the motion have a second? Second from Commissioner Louder. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. Item 4, Planning and Zoning, presenter Bob Remsburg, I believe, instead of Michael Sandy.
You seem to be correct.
All right. Good evening, Bob.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. Good to see you this evening. As you know, Mr. Sandy, many of you know this, I assume, assists with the Board of Elections, and he is out in the field at the moment, and I was expecting him, and he may show up any minute, and I'll be happy to turn this podium over to him at that point. But in the meantime, you got me. So it's good to be with you this evening. We have 2 cases before you this evening. The first one will be, let's see, get it from there, okay, is the item number ZA 18-12, Orion Renewable Energy Group. And you, of course, have received information on this in advance, and I will share this with you. The Orion Renewable Energy Group requests that portions of 3 tracts owned by Gus Shad and Cletus Hill, located on the northwest side of Reeves Island Road and on the southwest side of Glenmore Road, have the Solar Electric Power Generating System Overlay District applied to the current RA Residential Agricultural District, and part of Mr. Shad's land is M1 Light and Industrial Districts. The tracts combined contain 501 acres. The Solar Electric Power Generating System area will be slightly smaller than that due to areas along both US 52 and Reeves Island Road reserved for other development by Mr. Shad. The proposed overlay district on these 3 parcels will total approximately 439.9 acres. Orion Renewable has reached lease agreements with Mr. Shad and Mr. Hill for use of their properties, and the total project also includes an additional 254.4 acres, which are within the zoning jurisdiction of the village of Meisenheimer. They're owned by Mr. John Pickler. The project proposes to include approximately 342,000 solar panels. And you can see the outline here on your screen. The area at the top is Mr. Shad's property. The area with the yellow stripe, and off to the left is the area, a portion of the area reserve that's in the industrial district that Mr. Shad is holding back and not including in the overlay district. And there's a little section up on Reeves Island Road as well that he's reserving. Mr. Hill's property is the property along the county line on Glenmore Road, kind of the left-hand side of your screen. That's the lighter color. Mr. Pickler's property is the darker color there, but that's within the jurisdiction of Meisenheimer. That is before their board coming up in the immediate future for them to consider that as well. And I believe that's a special use permit for them. All right, currently the properties are zoned RA and M1. You can see on the zoning map here, the light green colors being RA, Mr. Hill's property, and much of Mr. Shadd's property that's under consideration is RA, and just a small portion is the M1 district, which is light industrial. Normal uses in the RA district, as you probably know, include single-family dwellings on large lots, farm-type enterprises, including greenhouses, poultry houses, hatcheries, and agricultural processing facilities as part of bona fide farms. The M1 district allows for manufacturing activities which, as our ordinance says, can be operated in a relatively clean and quiet manner and, quote, will not be obnoxious to adjacent residential and business districts. And you can see a little closer up view of that on this slide. And you can see the various properties. If you're familiar with the GIS system, you can see wherever you see COU in front of zoning, that means county. That's under county zoning jurisdiction. And if you see MIS down there, that, of course, would be under Meisenheimer's jurisdiction. So the town limits and their extraterritorial jurisdictions, I believe, kind of bump into this area. And at the very bottom of the page, you see RA district under Meisenheimer, a large parcel there, and that's the John Pickler property that's under consideration. The proposed solar generating system will connect to existing Duke Energy transmission line, which runs through the area. Most of the Shadd property is wooded. As you can kind of see in this slide, if you can look, if you can take away the solar arrays there, you can kind of tell that it's mostly wooded under there. And a buffer of existing vegetation will be preserved as part of this project. Much of the hill property is open. You can kind of see that in this slide. Many of the borders, though, are actually wooded, and these trees will be preserved as natural buffers. Plans have been submitted to the county to indicate the required buffer will be added where needed, and all areas will meet the fencing requirements that we have. Orion Renewable is submitting an interconnection request for a large generating facility to Duke Energy for their facility. Traffic on Reeves Island Road, let's see, here we go, another view. Average is about 210 vehicles a day, and also on Glenmore Road, it also is 210 vehicles per day, according to 2015 NCDOT traffic counts. US 52 obviously traverses the area with an average of 6,700 vehicles per day in 2016. Similar to other solar farm projects that you've seen, traffic will be increased during the period of construction, but any increase will be minimal during regular operation, because these things don't take a lot of staff. The solar areas are located far enough from US 52 to be mostly out of sight. Buffer requirements are shown on the plans per our recent updates. They meet our requirements in the zoning ordinance. And once grown, they should block the solar fields nearly entirely from view, especially as you travel up and down Highway 52. Pfeiffer University and its trustees are aware of the project and the planning department, and I believe you have received a copy of a letter addressed to you from President Keith supporting the project. She states, quote, "We look forward to having Orion as neighbors and to the potential of having a partnership with them that could benefit our campus and our students. We are also excited about the positive economic impact this project will have on both the village of Meisenheimer and Stanley County." Other information here, the Shadd property is located in a growth area per the 2010 Stanley County Land Use Plan, and about half of the Hill property is also in a growth area per that plan, including the frontage on Glenmore Road. Planning staff recommends approval of the request since the property is located in a growth area and will have minimal visual and environmental impact. As we said, Mr. Shadd's reserving about 49 acres of the area zoned M1 light industrial for potential future development. The planning board reviewed this project at its October 8th meeting and heard from representatives from Orion and the property owners involved. They outlined the scope of the project and described the buffers that would remain and the places where additional buffers will be needed. Dr. Colleen Keith also presented Pfeiffer University's support of the project, and I believe she's here tonight There were none present in opposition to the request. Having heard the public input, the Planning Board discussed the project and voted to recommend approval to the Board of Commissioners by a vote of 4 in favor to 2 opposed. Those in favor cited that it should be approved due to the positive economic impact and no significant effect on the value of neighboring property. After the meeting, the 2 dissenters indicated that their primary concern had been with Duke, was with Duke Energy, not the specifics of this particular project. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions, I guess?
Thank you, Mr. Remsburg. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I got one question. Bob, on the top of the Hill property, where is the green landscape, is that a structure in there?
Yes, I believe so. Let me get a little closer view. There is a home there, as I recall. I'm going to look back. Yes, okay. I'm seeing the Orion people nod their heads at me. And so there is a buffer all the way around that particular piece of property. I'm not sure the status of that house, though. Is it?
It is Mr. Hill's
That's the Hills House.
house.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm looking
okay.
at our land agent to confirm. It is the Hills home, and Ms. Hill is here, not to put her on the spot. They are
Okay.
supporters of their land.
I couldn't tell from.
Sorry, sure, you're right.
Picture
Thank
I
you for
had.
asking that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I've got one, Bob.
Yes, sure.
Does the project, of course, we wouldn't be privy to this, but does anyone know, does the project go into Cabarrus County or Rowan County at all?
I do know the answer to that. It does not.
Okay.
It comes right to the border, but it does not, including right here. You can see that that's the county corner is right there.
Right.
So it does not. There was some consideration, I think, earlier on of adding some properties that were in Rowan County, but I think they were able to fit it all in Stanley.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? All right, seeing none, we've got to have a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak for or against this project?
We represent the applicant and would love to present.
Yes, ma'am, come forward.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Ross. I'm with the law firm of Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein, and I represent Orion this evening. Also, I have with me Peter Morse-Burke, who is with Orion Renewable Energy. We also have Brian Lemoyne, who's the land agent that has been in the community for many, many months and has helped us lease the land. I would also note that we have here this evening Mr. Shad, one of the property owners, Mr. and Mrs. Pickler, also one of the property owners, and I believe Ms. Hill is here. Apologies, she might have slipped in when I didn't see her. So we have great landowner support. In addition, we do have Dr. Keith from Pfeiffer University. I believe that the Picklers and President Keith will present or speak in support of the project at the appropriate time. They reserve the right not to if they so choose not to. We want to be very thorough, but also brief and judicious with your time this evening. So we have a short presentation that Peter will actually give to you, and then I would like to reserve the opportunity to do a little bit of a closing. As we go into the presentation, I would just like to say your staff has been incredible to work with, both Bob and Michael. We had meetings. Your ordinance is one in which we can read, we can understand, and we can comply with. And we have presented to you an application today that we believe is a complete petition for the overlay district on these parcels. And so we are seeking your approval of that petition. It is not lost on us that under your ordinance, in order to grant the overlay district, or the reason for the overlay district in your ordinance is to direct the location of what you refer to it as an SEPGS, Solar Energy Power Generation System. That's the definition. To direct the location of the SEPGS facilities within the county, to protect residential areas and land uses from impacts of SEPGS facilities, to minimize visual impacts of SEPGS facilities through careful design, placement, and landscape screening, to accommodate the growing need for SEPGS facilities, to provide alternative sources of power in the county and region, and to promote economic development by placement of such facilities in locations not to impair conventional manufacturers and industries in locations where municipal-type services are located or planned. We would submit to you that the position before you places the solar facility exactly where one belongs. It is visually buffered. It is in an area of your community that makes sense for solar development for a number of reasons. It will be an economic driver for this community in terms of the property taxes that will be generated from it. Solar is a good neighbor. You'll probably hear that a couple times from us this evening. So as you listen to the presentation, we ask that you consider the ways in which we have satisfied those requirements of your ordinance. Let me see if I can get this. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Peter.
Great. I'm Peter Moritz-Burke with Orion Renewable Energy Group. Members of the Board of Commissioners, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you and tell you about the project we're developing. I'd like to echo Ms. Ross's comments about the planning staff and how they've been great to work with and have done a thorough job of reviewing the project. Please interrupt me with questions along the way. I'm sure you won't hesitate. Orion Renewable Energy Group has been doing this for a very long time. We've been a developer of solar and wind projects since the mid-1990s. We've developed projects throughout the United States and around the world. We've developed over 5,000 megawatts of projects, primarily wind, but significant number of solar projects as well. Our reputation follows us everywhere we go, so we build win-win relationships with stakeholders across the board, landowners, local communities, and those that purchase the electricity from the facilities we develop. So Meisenheimer Solar is an 80 megawatt photovoltaics facility. It's located on 6 parcels. 3 of those are under Stanley County jurisdiction and 3 are under the Village of Meisenheimer jurisdiction, as we've heard previously. The facility is considered a major SEPGS under the county ordinance and requires an overlay district to be approved for the parcels in Stanley County, and that's what we're seeking today. We already talked about the parcel owners, Mr. Gus Shad and Mr. Cletus Oliver Hill, are the 3 parcels that make up the project under county jurisdiction.
Peter, if I may interrupt you,
Sure.
I forgot to mention that we increased one of the setbacks and have a revised site plan to hand out.
Okay, you want to go ahead and...
So we increased the setback on the Hill property, which I believe Commissioner Eford, you had asked about the light green along that area. We actually increased the setback since we submitted to the planning board to 75 feet, just through conversations as we looked and started refining some of the conversations around the site plan, realized we could do that, and there was no reason not to. So I'm going to hand you a new map book that goes in place of the one that you have before you. I've given the same version to Bob. The only change related to the county is that increased 75-foot setback along Glenmore Road. And then on the insets, the 25-foot. It also writes the numbers in there for you. I can't read them, so if you may have better eyes than I do, but may I approach?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So with that revised site plan in front of you, I think, as we talked about earlier, there is an existing vegetative buffer around the northern parcel of the Shad property. That's the pink line, and the pink line around the remainder of the southern parcel is also existing vegetation, and we will add a new visual buffer, vegetative buffer, where that green line is along Glenmore Road and around the inset. Any questions about the revised? And just to highlight again what Ms. Ross said, along the green line there on Glenmore Road, that is the setback that's going to be increased from the original proposed 50 to 75 feet.
Any questions from the board?
Nope.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, indeed. So I'd like to point out that the SEPGS meets or exceeds the required setbacks. The collection lines will be underground to the extent possible. The SEPGS modules are not going to exceed 25 feet in height when oriented at maximum tilt, and in fact, they're significantly lower than that. A 6-foot fence will be installed around the SEPGS, and the entire perimeter of the SEPGS will be screened by a 10-foot landscape buffer and by a 25-foot landscape buffer around residences, all in accordance with the ordinance. So just want to point out that these exhibits were included in the original application. But Exhibit 4 that wanted to highlight here is an example of one that would be approved later during the project development process. So in specific reference to what triggers the decommissioning plan, first items 1 and 2, the system, if the system does not produce power for a period of 18 months or the system is rendered inoperable and will not be repaired or replaced, those are conditions that would trigger the decommissioning requirement. And with that, I'll conclude, and I thank you for your time.
Mr. Chairman, I
Commissioner
do.
Vaughn?
Have you had any solar farms that have been decommissioned?
No, we have not. And the typical life of a solar facility is over 20 years, probably closer to 30 to 35 years. So we're still in that mid-maturity phase. We have not seen, and Orion has not decommissioned any solar facilities.
Any other
Solar industry.
questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say, Mr. Shad reminded me there was a question of if this spilled over to Caparis or Rowan County. It does not. The solar development does not. There is land in Rowan County that Mr. Shad's land that Orion has an option and a lease related to, should they, when they were designing it, need to use that. But as was indicated by, I think it was Bob, they were able to design it such so as to not use that land. And obviously, the more jurisdictions we have to coordinate with zoning on, the harder it is, just because every ordinance is different. You're different than the village of Meisenheimer. And so coordinating all of that. So from Orion's perspective, this project and this layout made sense and was a good way to move forward. So there is a land up there that has basically an option to lease on it, but with Mr. Shad, but is not subject to any entitlement application before Rowan County at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I got one question, sir. You said you didn't have any that were decommissioned. Do you have any that's in the 18th month process of being decommissioned?
No, we do not.
And is that 18 months? Why 18 months? 'Cause that seems like an awful long time, a year and a half for one to start producing or stops producing to when it's decommissioned. What does it do in the meantime of that 18 months?
Well, you can disconnect the systems so they're not feeding power to the grid, but that 18 months is really just the period required under the ordinance. So if we came into a situation where the facility needed extensive operations and maintenance, work, we could do it within that 18-month period. But if it extended longer than that, it'd be safe to assume that the facility was losing money or was at the end of its contract and would not be started again. So it'd be decommissioned.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Eford. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Do we have anyone else here that wishes to speak for or against this project?
I would.
Yes, ma'am, come on.
I'm Colleen Keith, and I'm the president at Pfeiffer University, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. When we first heard about the solar farm, I grew up in northern New York where they have big wind farms, and they have the big wind turbine things all over, and I was actually kind of excited about it. But what I did first was I went to my environmental studies faculty, and I said, what do you think about this? So they posed it. They happened to be meeting in class that afternoon. They posed it to their class. Here's what one of the students sent me. The human population continues to grow, and central North Carolina is one of the fastest growing regions in the U.S. We need to keep up with energy demand for all these people, and solar power is the most environmentally conscious way to do so. Solar power does not release climate-altering gases nor other health-affecting air pollutants such as those released by fossil fuel-burning power plants. While hydroelectric plants also contribute little to the factors causing climate change, they negatively impact our sensitive and already challenged river ecosystems in many ways, so solar farms are a better choice in this regard as well. Anytime I can get a college freshman or sophomore to send me something like that says this has to be a good thing. So we're excited to have it there. As I said in a previous meeting, I questioned their sanity in wanting to put anything next to a college campus full of students that party, but I think we can make this work. So we're very much in favor of it, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Keith. Do we have anyone else? Mr. Pickler?
Hi, I'm John Pickler. Kind of, I guess, in the middle where it's going to connect to us. Mr. Sad's part is going to connect to us, and also the Hill property is going to connect to us. But I appreciate the time coming and talking to you. I own the property on Wesley Chapel Road, consisting of the 250 some acres. My wife and I purchased this property approximately 4 years ago. As most of you know, I'm a full-time farmer, and we're diversified. We grow different crops, from cotton, soybeans to wheat, corn, pleasure corn. A lot of y'all kind of know what pleasure corn is. You know, some of you that deer hunt, you know what we do. So I'm diversified, and I look at this as also as farming, and it's capturing the rays each day. And if you all think about it, there's two things that's going to happen each day. We hope the sun is going to come up. If it don't, we won't need electricity. But we all need electricity. We got it here right now. You know, and it's growing. The population's growing. So I feel like this is a safe way to produce, you know, good quality electricity. We farm approximately 1,200 acres. We run across this land approximately 5 years ago. We were looking to lease land, you know, for more acres on the farm. And we run across this, an insurance company out of New York owned this land. It was in bankruptcy. We were lucky enough to buy this, on this. Well, I was aware that this is not the best of farmland in the county. This is Richfield land. If y'all know anything about farming, Richfield land is, the topsoil is kind of shallow. But anyway, we took a chance with it, you know, in trying to make this work. And it also, this was, I know y'all probably heard of the Barringer Gold Mine. Well, it's not every day you get a chance to buy a gold mine. You know, whether it's operable or not, you know, it's part of history, and we were intrigued by that. So, and we throw the idea around, you know, mining it, but it's a lot further than old John wants to go down and go after it. So we kind of let that go. And I've been approached by several mining businesses, and that were trying to open it back up. But I was taught growing up from my dad and all, I wanted to be a steward of the land, good steward of the land. And I knew that mining would not be a good neighbor. Mining Sunrays would be much different from the environment in the surrounding counties. There's no noise, there's no dust, no trucks. I don't see how you even know it's going to be there with the proper setbacks and the borders is going to be there. In 2017, we paid a total of $4,600 in taxes. $3,475 went to the Stanley County, and $1,143 went to the town of Misnomer. I have no idea what the increase is going to be for the county, but I know it's going to be more than that, guys. We know that with the amount of outlay that Orrin is going to put in to this project. My wife and I have full confidence in Orion and their promise of buffers to camouflage the panels, making it more attractive to the surrounding neighbors. Guys, if there's one thing that we want to do, I want to be a good neighbor, and we all do. And we're going to strive to be a good neighbor. Several have voiced concerns about dismantling the project in 30 years or so. I am not worried about this. I can't imagine a company spending millions to prepare the site and then completely abandoning the project area. The equipment with new and improved versions, yes. I do that daily. Well, not daily, but weekly and yearly with farm equipment. We know what it is to update, and I'm sure they'll do that too, because technology is changing every day. Guys, solar energy is not a wave of the future, it's now. I feel like this is an excellent opportunity to show the citizens of Stanley County and other areas that we are progressive and open to new ideas. This, in my turn, may attract more new businesses, bring growth to our community. I really appreciate the Pfeiffer College president speaking. It means a lot to have that kind of support. And I would like for y'all to take that in consideration in your vote here in the Lord. For these reasons, I hope you'll vote yes on the business consideration. And for my wife and I thank you for your time, and I appreciate you letting me speak. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Pickler. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak for or against the project? Yes, sir. Come on forward.
I don't want to speak for or against the project. I just wanted some answers to some questions, like environmental impact.
If you'd like to come forward, you can pose those questions. We can see if we can get some answers for you.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Anthony Carter, an old-time scouter, AT&T employee, retired. And I just wanted to address to Orion the environmental impact that solar farms have on the community and the close residents thereby.
Go ahead and get us some questions. We'll try to see if we can't pose it to them. And
Is there any radiation implications from solar panels?
Would you like the applicant to respond serially or when Mr. Carter's complete?
Yeah, I'd like an answer to that question.
Yeah, no, I just was wondering if the chairman.
yeah, if you'd like to come forward, we'll be glad. I was going to write his questions down, but if you want to respond as he asked.
I think we'd love to hear all of them and then respond.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, that's probably the main one of the main ones. And if there's any other environmental hazards that, other than radiation, I really don't know what else there could be unless it's soil erosion or soil water and contamination. So is there any water contamination involved in this, even though you say that most of the sites that won't be over 25 feet for your pods, the other effect will be underground cables. So if those carry that much wattage and current that's radioactive at that same time, is it going to bother the people around it or the water sources? There's quite a few water tables surrounding those lands as well. And as we all know, water tables go everywhere. I guess that's probably my biggest, not complaint, but my biggest concern. If it were on my land, within a safe or unsafe dimension from my home, I wouldn't want it. But if they can prove that it's not, then I'm all for it. I think solar energy is a great thing if it's used and, taken care of. And one other question, what causes the contamination before you start tearing it down or trying to improve on it? What is the cause of the contamination? Oh, and one other question. Is there going to be a storage facility? Because I understand when you first bring it in to the panel that it's DC power, I think, and then it has to be converted to AC power to be infused into the existing AC power as it goes into the high transmission lines. And we all know high transmission lines, or at least I know, that they are radioactive. So I'd like to know the answer to those 4 questions, just as a health concern.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'll see
Yeah,
if I
ma'am.
can't, I've taken a few notes. I'll see if I can't
Okay.
relay a few of those questions. Thank you,
Pretty
sir.
much it.
Would you like to come forward?
I'm going to let Peter respond from Orion, and then I'd like to just follow up with a little bit of evidence from reports out of NC State University that address some of these topics. But I don't want to repeat myself, and so I did want to check in with Bob and Michael. Have the commissioners been provided the North Carolina State University reports related to health and safety impacts of solar photovoltaics? Then I won't read it to you, but I'll reference it. You want it addressed specifically.
Sure. So there are a number of questions raised. Do you want me to respond to them one by one after you repeat them back, or how would you like to do that?
I had environmental hazards, soil erosion, water contamination, issues with the water table, storage / transfer facility, I guess, from AC to DC power,
Well,
and then
let me-
radiation.
Yep, that sounds good. Let me try to bundle a number of those into conceptual blocks. And first of all, there's no radioactive substance associated with solar. This is not, nothing like with a nuclear power plant. Solar generates electricity through its crystalline panels. They're polycrystalline silicon panels. Which the core component of which is sand. Sand is converted into polysilicon, and then those polysilicon ingots are converted into panels. So there's no nuclear reaction occurring with the conversion from sunlight to electricity. As far as water contamination, the water we typically use to clean the panels would be the most abundant source of water being used on site, and typically that's deionized water. We can even use local water that comes out of the tap if it's sufficiently clean. If it doesn't have high mineral content and cause scaling on the panels, we can use that, but otherwise it's deionized water, so it's perfectly clean. As far as contamination of groundwater, the groundwater sources, that deionized water would be going down into the ground and would produce no more contamination and possibly less than rainwater would cause.
Chairman.
How much water is used to clean those panels, and how often do they clean them?
That depends on how often they get dirty. So if it's if it's in a dusty area, sometimes we'll clean them as much as once a quarter or maybe twice a year. But in some cases, in very dry climates, they're not cleaned hardly ever.
You just use water, you don't use any kind of chemical?
In some cases, we'll depending on what is scaled up on the panels, we can use a descaling agent, but that's typically not required. Typically, we use deionized water or regular tap water.
Any other questions? Mr. Carter, does that give some sort of answer to some of your questions?
Yeah, he didn't answer the question about what causes the panels to become deteriorated and non-useful.
I guess you're referring to the decommissioning, when they would potentially decommission a project.
Yeah, it's got to be from the deterioration. It's getting contaminated. It's getting contaminated for some reason, isn't it? And why it's become non-useful.
Can you speak to that?
Sure. I think I understand the question. The panels lose their power producing ability over the life of the panel. So over the 30-year life, they will decrease in production, but they don't physically decompose. So there's nothing falling off the panels onto the ground. It's that decomposition process, I think, really is more of a drop in capacity of the facility itself. So at the end of the life of panels, 30 years, they can be reused. In fact, there's a market for decommissioned panels. They simply produce less, but they're not dangerous in any way.
I did want to ask him where they get their panels from, manufactured in the United States or overseas?
Mr. Carter, if you've got some more questions or comments, if you would, come on forward so we can get it in the mic and we've got it recorded. It's hard for me to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. And
I should have wrote these questions down, I guess.
yeah.
But that comes to mind is the fact that I didn't know, or I don't know, who they're purchasing the solar panels from, and for beginning and for repair. Are they coming from the United States? Are they built here in the United States? Are they purchased, bought, and built in a foreign country and then purchased and brought over here? That's another question I wanted to ask. And if they were getting any kind of government tax breaks on producing solar energy in the United States from our government for doing that? Any tax breaks or subsidies for the production. And I'd be curious to how much profit they actually make in the refusion or the transference from solar to electrical, and how much Duke Power is giving them to do it. I mean, how much they're making from Duke Power, and if it's profitable for them to be able to afford, the long-term use of this stuff, this power, this solar energy for the community down the road, or is it just going to go away and they're going to leave all this stuff out there in the fields for people to have to deal with later on? And if they don't take it away, is it going to be more environmentally impactable to the environment at that time? I mean, if it's not taken away and destroyed correctly, I think it could be a very large impact on our environment. And I don't think they're manufactured here in the United States, but I could be wrong.
Mr. Chairman, if I could speak to the latter part of that and then turn it over to Peter from the legal perspective related to the decommissioning. Per the ordinance, as well as by the leases that we are in, the project has to be decommissioned if it doesn't produce power for 18 months. Or if the system is rendered inoperable and the county comes to Orion and says, doesn't look like it's out there working, give us your plan for repair or replacement, then we have to decommission it by both your ordinance, this plan that will be submitted at building permit, and by our lease. And what that means is taking away everything as it's written on here, up to 3 feet under the ground. which is a very typical decommissioning process across the state from counties that 3 feet below. And so it would not be left if it was not operating. So just from a pretty legalistic standpoint, both by under the lease and pursuant to your ordinance and our requirements under that ordinance, it would be decommissioned in compliance with those. So wanted to address that point from sort of the legal perspective, and then we'll turn it over to Peter to try to address the other issues that Mr. Carter raised.
Thank you, ma'am.
And if I understand it correctly, it's a question about the origin, or where the panels
Where
themselves
the
are manufactured.
panels manufactured is what
Yeah.
I got.
So, just from a general perspective, the vast majority of solar panels used around the world are manufactured outside of the United States. There are a small number of manufacturers in the U.S., but again, that's a relatively small number. So for this particular project, we have not selected a supplier for the panels. So we don't know where they're coming from at this point.
Where, in past projects, where was the supplier located?
They've been located primarily in Asia.
China? I mean,
China is...
Taiwan?
China's probably the largest manufacturer. Taiwan is another. Malaysia is another manufacturer. Some are manufactured in the Philippines. But I'd say that's the number. And India also is becoming a larger manufacturer as well.
Mr. Carter, did we cover most of it on that? All right. While I've got you here, I've got one question that I was going to wait, but project this size, how many homes would that particularly, a project that size power?
Yeah, it estimated roughly 35,000 homes could be powered by this project.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Morgan, go ahead.
I just wanted to know what the estimated cost that y'all envision at the time of decommissioning. What do y'all plan that for, just for future references?
The cost of the decommissioning effort itself?
To totally reclaim it back once y'all move out?
Well, it's going to come to a net. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I understand y'all have them in the contracts and I've seen other solar farms come back and say, well, we're going to decommission. Mm-hmm. What are y'all anticipating? Because I know a lot of y'all have been around for a while, but I know there's other companies coming out here that are startup. A lot of startup companies fail. Mm-hmm. What is the estimated cost of that decommission?
To decommission? And I apologize, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can get it back to you.
And I think, not exactly your question, but I will intimate what's important. It actually comes to a net positive, which I think is where Peter was going. The salvage value, the resale of the components that make up the project actually result in more money than the cost of decommissioning it. So it's a net positive to the company at the end of the decommissioning. Village of Meisenheimer, not Stanley County, but Village of Meisenheimer has a requirement in their ordinance for a cost analysis to be provided. So we have done that on the portion of the Village of Meisenheimer. I can quickly try to pull it up and try to answer that other point, or would point you to their application if it's more curiosity than a point for tonight. That does not include the cost for the county portion, but given the similar size, the similar soil, the similar everything, you could certainly reasonably expand that cost. Please don't quote me on it, but I believe the net positive to that was in the several million range. And I will try to pull that up on my email. I just did not think to have it this evening since we're not in the village. Apologies.
Any other questions from Commissioner?
Just a comment, because I'm proud to know that we have it here in Stanley County. Reform Line Products purchased a solar company several years back, and I do know that they manufacture the stands that are needed for solar panels. and they may still own the solar company out in California. It'd be great to see if you all get to the point of purchasing things to at least inquire locally to see if we can get some product made here in Stanley County. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions from commissioners? All right, is there anyone else here that wishes to speak for or against the Orion project?
I just wanted to mention that you never covered the tax breaks and/or
Subsidies. Can you cover the subsidies
Sure.
for us?
If I may, maybe, and this will be part of my closing, if that works, if it's not for the closing, because it is part of my closing. The increased taxes paid on the property, the estimated capital investment is over $100 million. And the estimated property taxes for the project over the life of the 30 years are approximately $2 million. In the first year, it's approximately $140,000. Now, that's total for the project. And so that is an increase. There is, to directly answer the question, by statute, an 80% abatement on the business personal property. That's by statute. That's just the way it is. So the 20% of the capital investment, that portion that is of the business personal property, is what would be the increased taxes. There is no business personal property tax or very negligible equipment, farming equipment. And we've talked with Mr. Pickler in terms of that for his property. For Mr. Shad, the same. It's treed right now. So any increase in business personal property is an increase from zero. For the real property, it will be taken out of the present use valuation program. So the county and the village will receive the 3-year rollback taxes that occur when there is a change of use. That's on the real property. No abasement, no incentive, that's just straight paid. And then in addition, going forward, you will have increased tax on the real property because it will no longer be in the present use agriculture or timber program. So that's where you see all of your property tax payments coming in, and the increase that you really will realize by this change of use from agricultural and timber, as well as from the investment. That over $100 million is primarily business personal property, and would come in and be taxed.
Thank you.
If there are any other questions, we're available.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions? Anyone else here that wishes to speak for or against this project before we close the public hearing? Anyone here that wishes to speak for or against this project? All right. Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. What's the pleasure of the board?
Chairman, I make a motion that we approved zoning amendment 18-12 for Orion Renewable Energy Group. And one of the reasons would be it is in a growth area.
Got a motion from Vice Chairman McIntyre, second from Commissioner Morgan. Any further discussion from the board? Got an amendment to the motion based on county attorney comments.
Starting with this project. This project meets the requirements for the SEPGS overlay district and will promote the economic development of the county and protect the area from further subdivision of farmland, which are goals of the Stanley County Land Use Plan.
Got an amended motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one last question.
Commissioner Lawhon.
They talked about a 6-foot chain link fence. Is there anything on top of the chain link fence to keep somebody from climbing over that thing?
It's a border wall.
Yeah. According to the ordinance, a 6-foot fence, which is typically a cyclone chain link fence, plus 3 strands of barbed wire above that.
And that's per our ordinance.
Per the ordinance.
Any further discussion? Any other questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item B, ZA 18-11, Stanley Solar LLC request the establishment of a solar energy power generating system. Mr. Rensburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Appreciate it. Let me open this back up. It's probably up here twice, so let's see. Okay. Well, good evening again, and bear with me as we go through this kind of one more time. We do have a second request, and this is kind of a second request for how can I put it, from Stanley Solar. Solterra is the parent company of this project, so we will look at ZA 18-11. Stanley Solar LLC requests that portions of 3 tracts owned by Andrew H. McSwain and Stephen R. Eford, located on the southeast side of Old Aquadale Road across from Sides Road, and on the northeast side of Sides Road, approximately 2,800 feet west of the intersection with Old Aquadale Road, to have the Solar Electric Power Generating System Overlay District applied to the current RA Residential Agricultural District. The tracts combine to contain 191.27 acres. And I'll come to this slide, although there is a bit of a change here, so we'll get to that in a minute. But you can see the kind of the 2 parcels involved, although the McSwain property is a little larger than this. This was the original areas requested, with the exception of a little portion of the Eford property on Old Aquadale Road. We'll get to that in just a minute, but there's a change from what you received in your packets earlier to this too, and I'll get to that in a second. The solar electric power generating system area will be smaller due to flood areas, which you can see on the map here, existing vegetation, nearby homes, and topography. The proposed solar electric power generating overlay district on these 3 parcels now will total approximately 73 acres. Okay, so that's a change. Stanley Solar has reached lease agreements with Mr. McSwain and Mr. Eford for use of portions of their properties. Okay, this is the whole project on this. It's kind of hard to see this particular slide, but if you make it out, you can find Old Aquadale Road, and then the kind of train track looking thing going across. That's the overhead power, the high tension power lines going through the project. And then if you look to the left side, you see St. Martin's Road, and down toward the bottom you can see Sides Road. So we're dealing, the large portion that's contiguous with the power line running through it is the portion that was originally approved by this board in June. So that section is already Solar Electric Power Generating System Overlay District. These properties are additions to that district, which, as I said, was approved in June. Mr. Dennis Richter, who's here tonight, will share more about this, but as I understand it, the additional parcels that are involved will not actually increase the scope of the power generation, but will allow the panels to be more strategically placed to avoid topographic issues and preserve more buffer around the already approved area. This project is dependent, of course, like the other one, upon approval of Duke Energy. That still remains out there. The addition of these properties would provide some higher tax valuation for the county, and according to Mr. Richter, the project would likely go forward if approved by Duke with or without the additional areas. He may address a bit more about that. The issue with not having the additional property means the project would have to be more densely or more intensely developed within the already existing overlay district. Mr. Richter should be able to further explain this in just a few minutes. Currently, and I'll slip here, the properties are zoned RA, residential agriculture. In fact, the whole area that we're showing is zoned RA. There are no other zoning districts in the area. Normal uses, as I said before, in this district include single-family dwellings on large lots, farm-type enterprises, including greenhouses, poultry houses, hatcheries, and agricultural processing facilities as part of bona fide farms. Of course, those agricultural activities are allowed by state statute, and any changes agriculturally would not require review or approval by either the planning department or the county commissioners. As you heard back in June, the proposed solar generating system will connect to the existing Duke Energy transmission line, which runs through the area. Some wooded areas will be preserved, and plans have been submitted to the county indicating required fencing and buffer will be provided. You've heard that before. Plans have also been submitted and approved for the decommissioning and deconstruction of the solar arrays once the useful life of the system has been exhausted, similar to the project just before us. Data on inverter noise has been received. Actually, in both projects, we didn't talk about that before. Noise will be minimal on those inverters, and that's the part where they convert the power from DC to AC, okay? So the inverters, and they have a hum to them when the solar rays are being collected, and of course, and at night, there's no hum because there's no solar. But on the other part of that is, for the most part, these collectors are located on the interior areas of the projects, and therefore, when you get to the fence line, basically, you have to listen hard to hear the hum. Plans, let's see, make sure I get, the contract which Solterra is seeking with Duke Energy, I believe is for a duration of 20 years, and of course, may be renegotiated or extended at that time. According to Stanley Solar, the proposed system would generate enough power to supply approximately 12,000 homes for a year, and would have approximately 175,750 solar panels with an estimated value of over $70 million. Since the project is currently in farm use, property tax on the parcels is under $2,300 annually. With the value of the added infrastructure, estimated initial tax revenue would be towards $120,000 annually. Equipment values, of course, will depreciate over the life of the project. Just to mention, traffic, not a big issue. 570 vehicles per day on Old Aquadale Road, according to 2015 NCDOT traffic count. Regretfully, no traffic data on Sides Road, but there's not a whole lot of traffic on Sides Road. Traffic will increase during construction, but of course not much after that for this project. It is not located in a growth area, being strictly agricultural area of the county. During public comment portion of the planning board meeting, concerns were raised about health and safety of living near a solar farm, decommissioning of a solar farm, and the strength of the Stanley County zoning ordinance regarding solar installations. Information gathered by staff from NC State and other reliable sources addressing these issues was shared with you in a separate memo, since it applies to all solar projects, not just this one. Mr. Sandy and I will be glad to try to address any questions you may have about those reports. Here, let me point this out, kind of between these two slides. I tried to figure out how to show this to you. So the original, well, not even the original, but the second rendition of the request from Solterra was this, and you can see the lines, but the one you need to pay attention to kind of is the upper kind of left area. The brighter green is the areas that need buffering, but if I go back a slide, you're going to see a red angle there, and Mr. Richter may have some more updated slides or material for you, I'm not sure. But this is they've decided to change the project slightly. The section up there which says zoned area 1 and has a section of panels to the north, that would be toward Reese's Farm Road. That area would no longer be part of the project. Okay, so that goes away, and that was no longer part of the overlay district. It reduces the amount of land on Mr. McSwain's property to be considered in this project to 46 acres. Whereas it was, I think, about 73. So it's reducing the size there and changing the boundaries of the district just slightly. And that was a request from Solterra that we just received today. Okay. Been discussed a little bit, but it came out today. Again, you see existing vegetation will be preserved and maintained wherever possible to provide a buffer for the project. And we've talked about, I don't think I need to go into vegetation buffers anymore. You kind of get the idea of what that's situation. I will share that going through this area, and see if I can find, I don't think I've got it. There's this slide shows it somewhat well. On the right side of your screen, you can see Long Creek passing through kind of the wooded area. That'd be the low point on the property, and some of that area is floodplain, and the panels avoid the areas that are mapped as floodplain. In that, Mr. McSwain has indicated that he believes the project will be helpful in preventing erosion on his property, which of course is adjoining Long Creek. According to Solterra, we talked about the height of solar panels, and there was a question about that. 15 feet would be sufficient height to place panels on a rack, but other components will be higher, such as the inverters and lightning arresters, and the lightning arresters will be on the substation. That's not on any part of this parcel. That's on a section of the area already approved. But there will, of course, be inverters on the Eford and McSwain properties. I tried to sort through this because there's been a number of concerns raised, and so bear with me if I get to the slide, about distance and elevation and viewing. It's a little hard to maybe get between the slides here. The house that you see kind of here is Sean Honeycutt's on Reese's Farm Road. And up to the upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see St. Martin Road. So let me just share this. The nearest solar panel in this project to St. Martin Road will be more than 1,500 feet away from the right-of-way. The project is nearest to the homes of Sean Honeycutt, about 800 feet now with the revision, and I think I've got a slide here that kind of shows this. From Gerald Slater, about 225 feet. From Andrew McSwain's house, about 800 feet. And then if we go to the other side, which I don't have a map like this for, but it's about 100 feet from Doris Eford's house and about 125 feet, it looks like, from Stephen Eford's house. Of course, Stephen is one of the applicants for this request. The farm will be located close to Old Aquadale Road on the Eford property. Buffers will be installed as required by the zoning ordinance in all areas. These buffers, once grown, should minimize visual impacts of those traveling on Old Aquadale, Sides Road, and St. Martin. In fact, by the time this is done now on St. Martin, if you look on this map, kind of get an idea, your existing vegetation will block out much of this. Now, I'll go back to this slide, and if you've got your spectacles on and magnifying glass out, you'll see that its elevation up on St. Martin is about 490 feet. And by the time you get down to where the solar panels start, you're at about 410 feet. So you've got a 70, 80-foot drop potentially in that. In fact, a lot of that would be about 420 feet, I guess, about an 80-foot, 70 to 80-foot drop. So, you know, you're looking down the hill. So will you see it? I don't know. It'd be interesting to do what they call a balloon test, where you hold up a balloon, and bright red balloon or something, and stand up there in the road and see if you can see it. They do that for solar, not for solar, what's the word? Cell towers, thank you. So you can see what you can see. That, of course, I can step out in my yard, look up, and I see the county's new tower in Locust, because that's what's in my view sight from the house. So, you know, will you see this? I don't know. It'd be interesting to tell that. The main person I would say that has potential to see it potentially is Sean Honeycutt, but again, you've got to work at that. And you can also see Tim Presley, and I think I did a little map there, because he has a nice hillside along Sides Road, and you can see he's about 1,500 feet away from the solar field, but with some work, he might be able to see it as well. You've got, of course, an existing stand of trees there that would remain in place for the project. So that kind of gives you an idea, because these were some of the concerns that got raised to me as this project was coming along, so I thought I'd go ahead and kind of address them. But you also have about a 60-foot elevation drop from the Presley home down there. If you looked up the hill, you wouldn't see anything because you got the hill in the way. But and if you look further to the right, you're going to hit the hill alongside road that's pretty steep, and you're not going to see that way. But right through there, you potentially would. Okay? Planning staff has visited the properties involved in this request. The Eford property is currently in use for farm production with row crops. Most of the McSwain property is uncultivated and not in farm production of any type at this point. There are two poultry houses formerly operated by McSwain's that are now operated by Stephen Barbie. They're the ones in the middle of this image. Two other older poultry houses now on an adjacent parcel owned by Gerald Slater, and they're in disrepair and not used. A small section of the McSwain land is leased for horses and another portion for vegetable growing by a group of local families. With the adjustments to the project dimensions, these two uses should be able to remain mostly in place. Planning staff recommends approval of this project since the property is located in a rural area and will have minimal visual and basically no environmental impact. It also does not negatively affect the value of neighboring agricultural lands. Buffer requirements are in place per the recent updates that you made to the Stanley County zoning ordinance, and this project continues to meet all requirements of the overlay district. The Planning Board met on September 10th and October 8th to discuss this request. Board members delayed their decision until further information could be reported. After hearing additional information from the planning staff and comments from neighbors, the Planning Board did vote 4-2, just like the previous issue, to recommend approval of the project. The majority felt the project would be a benefit to the county economically and would protect the area from further subdivision of farmland. And I'll mention this, that was one of the concerns that the McSwains raised with me, was what happens to their land in the future? What can they do? Their immediate children are not interested in farming it. How can they preserve this as large tracts? Otherwise, it might get subdivided or broken into smaller home tracts or something different, which would be allowed under the ordinance. And they wanted the idea of keeping it as large tracts as they could. And that's one of the advantages they see of putting it into a solar electric power generating system. As I said, the board voted 4-2. Majority would support non-agricultural use which maintains water, land, and air quality. The goals, which were goals or are goals of the Stanley County Land Use Plan. When asked after the meeting, same thing, two dissenters indicated the primary concern was with Duke Energy, not the specifics of this project. And gentlemen, Jan, any questions, Mr. Chairman?
Any questions from the board for Mr. Remsburg?
I appreciate your patience. That's a lot of information.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing up. Is there anyone here wishing to speak for or against this project? If you will, Mr. Richter, come on up.
Bear with me a minute. I'm going to try to switch to the other computer. Not sure. We have to switch over.
Okay.
All right, we'll just go back
Yeah,
to the other
there it
one.
is.
Did it come up?
It came up there. It's not up here. Which, man, use your hard to drive that way.
Yeah. Oh, great, it's not on my screen. I'm going to switch the other computer. It's not coming up here. It's up on the big one.
We're going to go ahead and recess this meeting for about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and get this meeting back in order, if you will. Appreciate y'all bearing with us. Mr. Richter, if you'd like to proceed.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dennis Richter with Solterra Partners. We're the developers of Stanley Solar LLC. Thank you for being patient. I was trying to connect to the internet so I could do some more Google Earth pictures, but it's not going to happen, so apologize. So just to review a little bit, so Mr. Remsburg's already gone through this. The previous petition done about 4 months ago included approximately 390 acres for the overlay district, 50 megawatts AC, which equates to 111 million kilowatt hours of generation. It connects to the existing Duke transmission line. The cost of that project's approximately $70 million. It will pay approximately $125,000 in annual property tax. And again, it will come out of the present use, and that property, the real estate under that will be paying full commercial tax. And for that, the project does not use any of your city services. So this is the plan that was approved back 4 months ago. I wanted just to show it to refresh your memories. You can see at the bottom of the screen, there's some light green outline. That represents the larger buffer that we will be putting in. We put it in areas that weren't necessarily required, but we went ahead and did it. So it's the double screen buffer that was recently added to the ordinance. This is the entire solar farm. You can see the portion that was approved earlier, and then in gold are the new parcels that are requesting to be approved for the same district. And so Mr. Remsburg had mentioned we made a change actually on Friday, trying to be sensitive to the neighbors and their concerns, their views. We initially had the solar panels on the left side of your screen where the light green is. That was initially farther to the west, more in front of that yellow circle, which is a home. So we revised it once to what you see in light green now, then just recently on Friday we revised it again. The main reason was to try to accommodate concerns by the neighbors. So let me switch to Google Earth View, and Mr. Remsburg had a similar picture earlier where he tried to explain the proximity of the adjoining property owners to the area that we're looking to add to this solar overlay. If you can read your screen, this is where I was trying to have it active in Google Earth, where we could zoom in. So we have a couple of several property owners here. The Honeycutt property, as I mentioned before, is right here. It was within the 300 feet is within your ordinance where we have to double the buffer, increase the size of the buffer. Any home that's within 300 feet, we have to do that. The Honeycutt home was probably within 300 feet, and we're needing to increase that buffer. Homeowner was uncomfortable with that. They were at the other public meeting and expressed that. So I've tried to reach him. I have not been able to tell him, so he's finding out tonight that we've actually moved the buffer farther to the south. So now that home is approximately 800 feet. The vegetation that is kind of north of that red line, at the 800-foot line, that will remain, so that'll be natural vegetation. We will still do our double buffer, even though we're 800 feet away, but it will be beyond the established existing vegetation that will be on the McSwain property. So that's one. The other one is if we go to the east, Slater. He is within the 300 feet distance. I've met with Mr. Slater. I've walked the property with him. We've discussed the proximity of his home to where the line will be for the solar farm, and he is in support and okay with that. He has no objection to the location. He's here tonight, I believe, if you actually want to ask him that, but that's the indication I got from him. If you go over back to the west, Mr. Presley has a home off of Sides Road. He is the other person that might have a view of the solar farm. He's approximately 1,680 feet away from where his home is, and as Mr. Remsburg mentioned, he has upgrade, so that would be here. It would drop, I think it was 60 feet or 80 feet, down to the point where the solar farm would begin. And then it would be flat for a while, then it would ramp up to these chicken houses right here as far as the grade goes. So the actual visual impact for Mr. Presley, we believe, would be minimal, if any. There will still be some natural vegetation that will remain in this draw here, which is the draw for the drainage for the area. In addition, we will do the same buffer, that double buffer that's located along this line. We'll do it again along this line, down sides road to make sure that if there is any opening between the trees or the vegetation, that they won't be able to see the farm. He probably has a better visual of the chicken houses, I would guess, based on the elevations. So so those are the properties that are the closest. We move over to the Eford property. It's approximately 30 acres inside the red lines. We have a couple property owners that are also close. Only one that is within 300 feet, 216 feet. Doris Eford, that is Steve Eford's mother. She lives here. She is fine with the solar farm, has no objections. The buffer, as shown on the previous plan, the actual submitted plan, would be placed basically on most all of this property. Wherever there's not normal vegetation, we're doing the double buffer. So approximately 50 feet, 2 rows of trees. That'll follow all the way along here, back behind his home and down Old Aquadale and across the back. The Hudsons have a home down to the south. It's approximately 700 feet to the south. According to Mr. Eford, they have no problem with the solar farm. Or at least the son that runs the farm for the mother, I believe. But again, this will be screened. It's upgrade. So once that screening's in place, there wouldn't be, it would not be able to see anything but a row of trees. The Eford property, Mike Eford's property here, he's almost 300 feet, within 300 feet, but we're doing the buffer anyway to accommodate that. The Carter property, they've expressed some concerns. Their property is basically 800 feet away from where the solar farm would be, and the same buffer is on that side. Same for the McClendons. They have questioned the proximity. Their view would be very slight because the solar farm doesn't go on the front part of the property. It really only starts down here. So, through the field over to here would be the only spot where they would be able to see it. But of course, that screen and buffer would be there as well. I'm just going to hit quickly on these because it was brought up in the planning meetings about height of the racking and what they might see. So I think this was explained with the earlier petitioner, kind of the height of the racking. This is an illustration for racking that is a fixed tilt racking. It's approximately 7 feet in height when it's fixed. If there's any tracking racking, up to 15 feet. So even though there's a 25-foot allowance in the ordinance, the majority of the racking, all the racking really is going to be well under that and closer to the 15 feet depending on the topography, because the topography does roll. That will change the distance to the ground on some of the racking. You see again the 6-foot fence with the barbed wire. Your requirements are 3 rows. This just shows 1, and then the typical tree buffer. Just wanted to show, you've seen this image before, racking under construction. You can see the height of it relative to the person. An assembled solar farm with the inverters in the middle, but you can see kind of how the racking looks, how the panels look when they're constructed. The land here, the layout of this particular farm is very similar to this one. We will be following the contours as much as possible. We will be doing some grading to get to the point where we can get the panels consistent, but they will be rolling hills. There will be green spaces between. If you recall, one of the earlier slides we showed did not show panels on 100% of the site. Because of the topography, it breaks. And there's draws, and those draws will be green. Similarly, this is kind of a ground view of what that might look like. A corn crop in the back, trees in the back, and there's greenery between the sections. This is an example of the buffers. This is a double buffer, which is under your ordinance. The spacing of the trees, these are cypress. This is after installation. This is a similar buffer after maturity. So within 3 years or so, these would be to the height where you would not be able to see around them. This is one example. There are other evergreen screening that's part of your ordinance that we'll look at and decide what materials to use. Briefly, property valuation that was brought up at the last meeting. What I wanted to point out is there are a number of studies that are done that kind of show that that there really is no impact, no verifiable impact for solar on adjoining property values. This is a public document that was done by Cone Resnick back in August for a solar farm in Illinois. They did a study to determine whether it was affecting property values, not just in that community, but in others. And this is just a summary of their findings. It's a long report, but I just thought I would at least share it with you to show you that there is, well-respected advisory firms out there studying this issue. And they concluded that there's no consistent negative impact that has occurred to adjacent property that could be attributable to the proximity to the adjacent solar farm. Obviously, there's a lot more to this, but that's the summary of the report. Glare was brought up. We have to do a glare study for the FAA and for the Defense Department. In some cases, the glare study's been done on this project, and there were it did not qualify for any glare. The glass on the panels are anti-glare. They don't have a glint like you would have off glass. It's similar to what you'd see on top of a lake or a pond. Health and safety impacts, I won't spend any time on this. It's been hit a couple times today, but the North Carolina State study, it deals with electromagnetic fields, hazardous materials, potential of electric shock, fire safety. They concluded in their report that these were not concerns for solar farms in North Carolina. So, leaves us to the current petition. In summary, it's an additional approximately 75 acres to it's adding approximately 75 acres to the recently approved ZA 1803. It meets or exceeds overlay ordinance requirements. We've worked with adjacent landowners to the extent that we can to mitigate any visual impacts. Followed the ordinance to do that. The solar farm does not create any noise, odor, or environmental impacts. I think that's been covered, in the previous petitioner. And we've talked about in the first part that, one of the things I think I missed on there earlier is we talk about the insurer's additional property tax income. Just to clarify what Mr. Remsburg said, so we are back here today because after further, the timing on when we applied for the original zoning was back in early in the year. So since the time that we started that zoning process, the more engineering work we've done, we've realized that there's too much topo on parts of the existing farm, that we need some additional land to be able to move those panels. We also, based on the Duke Energy RFP, we also need to increase the DC, which is the DC is where the energy comes from, which would include some additional panels. So that could increase the value of the project beyond that $70 million. So that's why we're asking for the additional land. It's important that we have the land so that the project can be competitive and ultimately be built and be a contributor to your property tax base here in Stanley County. So with that, I will open to questions, and of course, I know there's several people that want to speak. So,
Commissioners, are there any questions for Mr. Richter? So, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak for the project, in favor of the project? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name's Steve Eford. I'm one of the landowners with the land in question. It's on the Old Aquadale Road. I've lived on this property in soon a couple weeks, about 64 years, and before making our decision to sign with Mr. Dennis, me and my wife went out and seen several solar farms around. I've been to Rockingham, Hamlet, down through there. I have seen on Rocky River Road in Union County, on Highway 75. There's a one going towards Waxhaw. We've been to the one and looked at it up on Richfield down 49. We've seen them every way. Seen them on the end of drag strips. We've seen them on next to golf courses. We've seen very nice houses located right next to them. We haven't seen no for sale signs for houses. And so that was something we wanted to consider before we, signed up and made sure it was all good. We checked on several things through North Carolina State that they put out to make sure, some legit sites that we could get some information through. And that's why we decided to sign. We had talked to Mr. Hudson. Now, his property joins most of mine, and he actually was very pleased that we were having it there. He's intending to build a home next to it. If you've been by there, you'll see some metal buildings he has put up on the back side. He's intending, if nothing happens, he wants to build a home. And he was, like I said, he was pleased. He said, I wish there was more of them around. That's his words. Checked with Mr. Edward that lives in front of us. He had no problems. And the other part of the solar farm that is across the road is with him. Now, Mr. Eford, Michael, he had a little concern about, he thought it would be an eyesore, but other than that, he was okay with it. So that's what we want to do. And I think there's been over a course of, like through the planning board and all, I think there's been some wrong information put out. Because I know some of it was questioned through the last time, that stuff that was being told was right opposite of what NC State had done a lengthy study on, and they found that there wasn't a problem with having a solar farm. So I think maybe some people have the wrong idea, and there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just like someone said earlier tonight, that it's just a different form of farming. And so the solar's been approved, and now what I'd like to do is just, it's for y'all, as a landowner, I have a right to use my land as I would like to, if it deems necessary and it falls within the ordinances and the law. I think this would be the best for me and my wife to put it into the solar farm, because me and my wife, we're almost at retirement age, and I'm going to soon have to get out. And as you know, as you get older, your needs start getting more. And I have seen it with people that as they get older, you don't think you're going to start having problems, but you do, and the money's there. It takes a lot. And with what we currently have, the crop that is on the land, it just won't be sufficient for retirement. But we think that by putting it into the solar farm, that it would really help us as we both retire, and help you to be able to do things that maybe you would struggle with if you didn't have the extra income. So, that's what we want to do, and we're going to still be living where we are. We're going to have on our back of our home, side of it, is going to be the solar panels. And that's just what I'd like to do. I think the solar would be our good neighbor. And I would just like to ask that if you all would approve it, that I have a right to do what I want to make an income with my land, as long as I follow the ordinance is being followed and the law. And I asked y'all tonight to approve this usage for me, because I would like to have the solar on my land. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. Anyone else here wishing to speak for project? Dan McSwain, come on up, Dan.
Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to address this issue. I came prepared for bear tonight. I brought 7 pages of notes. I don't think you want to hear it. It'll be repetitive of what everybody else has already said. I do want to state that this will be, due to my physical condition, this will be a very important thing for us, my brother and I, to retain this land in our family. I'm unable to work anymore and bring in any additional income. It's very important to us, to our family, to our farm, to be able to keep it in our family. as Steve said, we have the right to do what we want to do with this property. We're not breaking any laws, any ordinances, any codes, nothing. We've made great changes to the original plan to be good neighbors to all of our neighbors, to try to reduce the impact of what they will see. And I think we've done that. It's going to be very minimal visual contact from any of our neighbors anywhere. And, you know, as we've been told before, there's no noise, no odor, no environmental impacts. But there is a great impact to the county economic structure of what Mr. Pickler, Mr. Shadd are doing, what we want to do, and others that are coming forward. It's going to be that economic blessing that we've been looking for. I don't know where you're going to find anybody else that's willing to make a $70 million plus investment in the county just on Stanley Solar, or $100 million on the other project, and others to come. I don't know where you're going to find anybody else that's going to come into Stanley County right now and make that kind of financial investment in what we're trying to do. And I thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer them. But thank you. I hope and pray that you will pass this ordinance tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. Any members of the board have questions for Mr. McSwain or Mr. Eford? Is there anyone else here wishing to speak for this project? Anyone here wishing to speak against the project? You guys will come on forward. Good evening, Tim.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, I have some pictures that I would like to pass out, and I only did 7 of them for the Commissioners. Andy, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Bring them forward. Andy and I will share.
My name is Tim Presley. Me and my wife Deb live at 29649 Sides Road. We have owned this property, which is 37.5 acres next to the McSwains, since 1988. We have 30 of those acres that are farmed by George Burleson. Both properties are hills that come down to a small creek. Now, as you can see in the picture, the property in question is these pine trees right here. Also, you can see something else in this picture. Over here where you see this vacant land, and it looks kind of white because there was cotton planted on it, and he harvested it last week. That is the parcel of land off of Old Aquadale that you have already approved. And you can see this, I'm sitting on my deck behind my house. My house faces north and south. The back side of my property goes north. These panels, when they go in, will be facing south. So they will be looking at me, or I will be looking at them. The chicken houses that they were talking about earlier are covered by these pine trees. When they built those 2 chicken houses, I watched them. Sometime later, after they completed the chicken houses, they planted the pine trees up that slope. After quite a few years, the pine trees grew tall enough to cover everything. Now these pine trees, if this goes through, will be harvested. Now, some of them will be left around the chicken houses, but as you can see going up that slope down from my property, I will see a good bit of it, not just a little as they have indicated. You cannot plant trees tall enough as a buffer, because you can see I have tall trees down there below those pine trees on my property they're not going to be able to cover it. And also, my son and daughter are planning on coming back and building on that property. If they're going to be seeing these solar panels, then I don't think they're going to come back once they find out about it, because I haven't talked to them. I don't want to, it hadn't passed, so I don't want to stress them out. The other thing is, too, the chain link fence, 6 foot, and then taking up 3 strands of barbed wire. Last month, dove season came in, and at dawn, I was awakened with the gunshots. And there was shot after shot after shot in that area. It is a big place that they hunt. Not only dove, but deer and the others. And on those startup days, I don't lay in bed at sunrise. I go ahead and get up, because all I'm going to do is sit here and hear them. Also, with chaining off this maximum amount of land, what is it going to do to our wildlife? Because we have a lot of deer. In fact, I watched the gray and red foxes come up and eat the strawberries out of my wife's strawberry patch. But we don't know what the environment's going to do because of that to our wildlife. And I like it. That's why I live in the country. My wife and I are not against the solar. It's a good source of power, and we know it is coming. But it needs to be in a right place and the right type of property. Now, you've already approved the one up at Meisenheimer, and one of the reasons is that I know you approved it. Like I said, one, is that property, as he said, didn't produce much on a farming scale. My 30 acres that is farmed, we have from Long Creek in the mornings a fog that comes in across our property early in the mornings. Sometimes I have to wait till after 2 o'clock in the afternoon for my grass to dry out so that I don't clog my lawnmowers. It is a good yield, and what we get off of that property pays my county property and house tax. So just that 30 acres does produce for us a good yield. So I just want to let you know that when I go out and drink a cup of coffee in the morning and look at the view, it is very nice. Or in the afternoon, if I go out to do a cold one, it's a good view. But if this goes in, it's not going to be so good. Anybody have any questions? And I appreciate you letting me speak.
Any question from the board for Mr. Presley? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else wishing to speak against this proposal?
Evening, Commissioners. Sean Honeycutt. My name's been brought up a couple times tonight. Give me 1 second. And I didn't come loaded for bear. I'm just going to tell you how I got here. Of course, y'all have seen the map. The first proposed solar array was 10 feet off my property line, probably 100 foot from the house. I could sit in my living room and watch the solar farm while I'm watching TV. So it got me very upset. So I have been working in Edgecombe County, Halifax County, Northampton, Wilson County. So at work one day, I just got to thinking, I said, well, let me look at the zoning ordinances in this part of the country. Well, the funny thing is, when I pulled up their zoning ordinances, Edgecombe County is the first one I looked at. Edgecombe County zoning ordinance for a solar array is 8 pages. At that time, Stanley County's was 3. There's a lot of differences in there. There's a lot of stuff been left out. So Stanley County amended their ordinances a month and a half ago. Now they are 3 1/4 or 3 1/2 pages. So it didn't change a whole lot. I didn't bring any of my notes, but I heard some of y'all ask questions about the zoning in Stanley County. My first meeting at the planning board, I brought up the differences in zoning ordinances out of a paper wrote in 2014 by Michael Lovelady, I believe. He's a UNC Chapel Hill professor for the law school up there. But as I got to looking and as the first meeting went on, I got doing a little bit more research. So I actually got called 4 counties. Called Edgecombe County, called Currituck County, Halifax County, and Northampton County. I believe that's the 4 counties I called and asked zoning for solar. 3 of the 4 had one of the biggest problems I see in Stanley County's zoning ordinances. They had it in their ordinance, and it was decommissioning, requiring a bond or a irreversible letter of credit. I know that's the biggest one. It only cost $125 to dissolve a LLC. And if y'all don't know how these solar farms are working and what research I've done, they get tax credits, 60 to 80% tax credits. So if they put $100 million in, they're getting 60, 80% back in 5 years. So they only have to make $40 million to break even. Of course, if they want to make 10% on their money, they make their 10% on their money. They could, if they wanted to, or just like the fog that rolls in down Long Creek, if that fog stays in there enough and they're not making any money, why would they stay in there? So a lot of counties out east has put a decommissioning ordinance in their plans. Edgecombe County, they permitted their first solar farm in 2008. In 2015, with the help of North Carolina template for solar, or for zoning for solar, or energy development, North Carolina template for energy development, they used that as a guide to write their solar ordinances. What I brought, I wasn't necessarily going to speak. I was going to speak about, but the zoning has come up, so I figured that's a better topic. So we're looking at Edgecombe County. I've been working in Edgecombe County. I got 3 solar farms I drive past on my project. One of them is owned by Duke Power. The other 2, there's 3. Well, there's 4. I drive by 4, but I only pay attention at 3 of them. So there's 2 private owned and one's owned by Duke Energy. The Duke Energy one, there's a Duke Energy truck there every time I go by. Don't know what he's doing there. Sometimes he's mowing the grass, sometimes he's in his Connex. Don't know what he's doing. Grass is mowed. It looks just like a regular house. Not a house, a lawn like a golf course. Now the private farms are completely different. The private farms grew up with trees. Fence lines are grew up trees. I actually got some pictures on my phone, I didn't print them off, of gates being unlocked and nobody in. Got some pictures of the grass and these solar farms actually high enough it's on the back of the panels. I mean, they don't have any sheep in them, they don't have any cows in them. It's just something to making money sitting out there and nobody's got to look after. And I'm sure they probably got a guy that runs around and looks at them, but that's one guy overlooking a 500-acre, 400-acre solar array. So that was my biggest issue, was decommissioning and not having a bond or letter of credit. What little bit of research I've done, not North Carolina, but some other states and other counties require cash money up front, pay to play, and put it in an escrow account and let it compound interest until the solar farm is ready to decommission. It's hard to find how much it costs to decommission the solar farm. There's different numbers out there. I didn't want to do it by the wattage it produces. I want to do it by acreage. So there's only 2 places I found where it said anything about acreage. So about 6 weeks ago, the town of Brandon, Vermont, found it would cost $185,000 to decommission an 11-acre solar array. The town was getting ready to approve it. They found out how much it was going to cost. Of course, they figured that out. They made them put a bond or a letter of credit in. So just doing simple math on 500 acres, and I've got it wrote down somewhere here. So simple math, it would cost over $1,600 an acre to decommission an array. So the county has 500 acres. Let's assume this one's 500 acres. You're looking at $8.5 million to decommission if the LLC would happen to go out of business. That is a number from the newspaper from the town of Brandon in Vermont. This is what I found in Pasquotank County, North Carolina. It would cost, and this come up in their county commissioner meeting, it would cost $2 to $2.5 million to decommission a 300-acre solar farm. That is the exact amount of money you will make in 20 years off this particular solar farm. So you could actually be costing yourselves millions of dollars if this is approved. But going back to zoning, setbacks in these other counties is greater than Stanley's. Most of the ones I looked at is 100 feet. Height requirements, which has been brought up, they're typically 15 to 25 feet. There's some counties that just require 8 feet, as high as they could be, which would greatly reduce what you see. There's nothing in Stanley's solar or ordinances about glare or heat transfer. Can't remember what county it was because I didn't bring my notes, but I believe, can't remember, but there's a couple counties that require there be no heat transfer to adjacent property owners and no glare to adjacent property owners. Mr. Presley, I don't know if he'll get glare, but he's on the northwest side of these panels. So the sun's going to come up in the east. So there is a possibility early in the morning, the southeast, so there's a possibility early in the morning he could get some glare. And decommissioning is the other one, and we've done talked about that. So the solar company is going to argue that the value of the panels exceed decommissioning costs. I don't know, that it's hard for me to find too, but I did find this little interesting tidbit. The International Renewable Energy Agency, it's an intergovernmental agency supporting counties, or not county, countries in their transitions to sustainable energy future. Did a study back in 2016 and found that SI modules contain 86% glass, 10% polymer, 8% aluminum, mostly the frame, 5% silicone, 1% copper, and less than 0.1% silver, tin, and lead. SIG modules are 89% glass, 7% aluminum, 4% polymers, and a small percentages of other metals are copper, indium, gallium, and cesium. The TDTE modules are 97% glass, 30% polymer, and the other metals include nickel, zinc, copper, cadmium is so little percentage it don't even make it. And that's the 3 types of solar panels they are. So as you can see, there's not a large amount of money to be made on salvageable parts of any type in any type of solar panel. Some research I said says it costs twice as much to recycle a solar panel than it does to actually buy a new one. Most of the recycling is done in the United States. They're sent overseas to China, Asia, and either resold or recycled over there. Let's see. So I guess I'm going to finish up right there. So what I would ask for is this board to put permitting and zoning of solar farms, at least for the foreseeable future, on hold until the county re-looks at their zoning ordinances and decide if they're comfortable with not having a decommissioning bond, letter of credit, maybe getting glare and heat transfer put in the zoning ordinances. I'm like Mr. Presley. I'm not against solar. Actually, I think it's a good thing. It's got its place, but I don't think its place is Stanley County right this minute until Stanley looks at their zoning ordinances and at least call some other counties and get their take on it. And the only reason I'm up here is the solar farm's gonna be there for 20 years. I'm gonna have to look at it for 20 years. It is what it is, but as long as I know one day it's gonna be gone, I can deal with it. I'd like to leave Stanley County as good a shape or better than it was when I was here. And I don't want to pass the burden of solar onto my kids or my grandkids to be dealing with 30 years down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeycutt. Any questions from the board for Mr. Honeycutt? Anyone else here wishing to speak against this project? Mr. Eford, come on up.
First of all, I'm going to read a letter from Sandra Carter. Y'all may have it in your packet, I'm not sure. I don't know if y'all received it. I understood that y'all were supposed to.
Yep.
Do I need to read it?
No, I think all the board members got it by email today, and we've got a copy of it in our packet.
Has everybody read it?
Yep.
Let me just address a few things then and what I was hearing when I was hearing people talk. Could I give y'all some literature or some information?
Yes, sir. Come on forward. Nayland Eford for the record.
First of all, these are pictures from Michael Eaton's yard of what he will see
Yeah, get that so we can get it recorded.
But anyway, that's a picture that you can see from his front yard. And if you look to the, I don't have a copy of the picture, if you look to the right, you will see Betty Hudson's house. I've worked hard, I've knocked on a lot of doors, I've talked to a lot of people. And I should have gave this to you while I was up here, but here is an excess of 100 things of people that are against solar farms, against this solar farm. Now, they're still against solar, we're not against solar, we're against the location of this farm. And of what was being said a while ago, and I wrote down a few little things. Michael Eford is the 8th name on page 1. McClendon is on page 6, signature 1 and 2. Carter is on page 6, signature 3 and 4. Betty Hudson, which is Jimmy Hudson's mother, I talked with her a long time and we discussed everything, and she's on page 4, signature 7. And if you want to go ahead and surround that property, I didn't write down the page numbers, but you've got the Taylors, you've got James Russell, and you've got Kelvin Eford. And when we talk about the McSwain property, I have signatures. If you go through them, I could call the names, but I have signatures basically surrounding that property. And in fact, the 101 signatures basically surrounds the whole property, the whole proposed solar farm. People got caught with their pants down on this first rezoning. You would not believe the number of people, when I explained to them what was going on, they said, we didn't know nothing about it. The people from West Ridge Court, they've got a bird's eye view of it better than anybody. And I know there's some people getting tired of sitting. So the people that are opposed to this solar farm, if you would, please raise your hand. There's a couple of them have already left because of the length of this meeting, and they couldn't stay. But anyway, I really don't have a whole lot to say. I think I've presented the evidence. I'm not going to read Sanders' letter, but I will read the closing. In closing, as our Stanley County Commissioners, I urge you to be good stewards of this rich Piedmont land of Stanley County and our heritage, and deny Stanley Solar's request.
Thank you, Mr. Eford.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Eford? All right. Anyone else here wishing to speak against this project? Anyone else here wishing to speak for this project? For or against?
I'd like to have a chance to.
Mr. Richter, come on up.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to address some of the concerns that we've heard. And I'm not going to try to attempt to hit all of them. A lot of the facts that we presented about the safety of a solar farm, how solar farms are decommissioned, it's been covered tonight already. Mr. Presley, it's hard to, and I've got I'll put the picture back up. So it's hard for me to say that Mr. Presley won't see it. He has an opinion that he will. So I really can't refute that. But I will say that from a distance standpoint, as far as Mr. Presley's view goes, I did not get to see the pictures, but he is a pretty far distance from the solar farm. This frontage here is less than 300 feet. So while I'm not saying he wouldn't see anything, but it's not going to be his predominant view. He is actually to the east of the solar panels, so he likely won't, he's not really going to see the full front of them, so any glare, if there were glare, really would not affect Mr. Presley. talks about hunting, but of course hunting won't be able to continue on the property. Wildlife will be able to get around the 40 acres. It is fenced, but the creek beds and the area around it are not. So it's not, the wildlife would move around just like any other fenced area. Mr. Honeycutt's, mentioned about the decommission. He's very concerned about that. I think we've explained, previous petitioner, and we've explained how that works. There's, as the other petitioner mentioned, there's not a lot of data. There's not a lot of projects that have been decommissioned. But, keep in mind that this is a business. I dispute the economics Mr. Honeycutt gave, is that they don't work that way. It's a business. $70 million will be invested. Some of that will be tax credits, but it's still money that's spent to build the solar farm. Those are used to raise capital. So the banks and the lenders that will be involved in this project have a contract with the landowner. They have to apply by the ordinance, and when the solar farm is done, they will have to remove the farm. So it will be removed. No one's going to walk away from it. So the solar farm still has value once the contract's over with Duke. It will still continue to produce energy for 200 years. I mean, we're not going to keep it there that long because technology will change and we'll change out the panels, but it just continues to move forward. And as far as the ordinance goes, you're free to change the ordinance even after this hearing. The ordinance put in place would affect the solar farm if you were to make a change to it. So if you find that you need to change some of the ordinance based on what you hear today, then obviously you would be free to do that regardless of whether this farm's approved. So it would apply to us as well. Let's see. I'm not going to have the details there. Mr. Nayland Eford, does have a lot of names. I would just say, as you look at the petition, it also states in the petition they're requesting you to repeal and remove the solar zoning on the original farm. So I don't know under what conditions people signed, for what reason they signed, if it's just for the two pieces that we're talking about tonight, or it's for the entire solar farm. So I would keep that in mind as you consider that as well. So just in closing, as Mr. Honeycutt said, there are counties in the state that have solar ordinances. We look at those counties because they have an ordinance, and we know that if we follow that ordinance, we have a chance of building a solar farm in that community. Stanley has that ordinance, so that was one of the reasons that attracted us to this county to build the farm and to make the investment. We've had, community, well, in the original farm, I understand there's a number of people here that are against solar. I understand are against solar in this location, that there was a public hearing, there was a community meeting, there were meetings for the previous farm. It's unfortunate some of them didn't know about it, but we did address concerns at that time about a solar farm located in this location. And we're talking tonight about not that original farm, but we're talking about adding some pieces to that farm, which we contend have any visual impacts for any adjacent property owners have been mitigated. We've gone to the effort to mitigate those, change the boundaries of the farm as needed to make sure that it's far enough away from their homes, the ones that were concerned, that it's not going to be a visual, it's not going to be a visual issue for any of them. So we try to be sensitive to the community. We try to address concerns when we can. Sometimes we can't address them. If they're just in general about the location of the farm, we really can't address that. We can only address the visual impacts, if that's what the concern is, and go above or beyond what actually is required by the ordinance. So with that, we'd like to build the farm here. We'd like to include the additional parcels so that we can do that, be a taxpayer, make a significant investment in the community, and we ask that you approve the additional parcels for Stanley Solar LLC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richter. Any questions from the board for Mr. Richter? Is there anyone else here wishing to speak for or against this project before I close the public hearing? Yes, ma'am. Come on forward.
My name is Myrtle Parker. Thank you for listening. I have two questions for Mr. Richter, if I could. I live beside Nayland and beside Doug, so I'm right in the middle as well. My question is on the map that you were showing in Sean's house and where that farm is going, where would when they're bringing the equipment in and building it, what road, how are they going to get in and out of the property?
Like to come up and answer?
Yes, sir.
So we won't be using Reese Road or, yes. We'll be coming off of Sides Road. So there'll be an entrance, yeah, it's up. There'll be an entrance, it's in the zoning, it will be an entrance approximately here. All the equipment that will come into here, and it will be over a 6-month period.
Okay. So Sean's driveway won't be used? Okay. And the banks, are we using local banks?
No, this farm, you're talking $40 million loan or $50 million loan. So the banks that typically lend on these projects are national banks, international banks.
And nothing local?
Right, and when they're also the ones that typically work with the tax credits.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments, questions? Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and declare the public hearing closed. Is there any other comments, questions from the board? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chairman McIntyre.
I've heard a lot of comments tonight, and of course, I made the motion to approve the previous solar farm. I've heard a lot of things that give me pause tonight on this particular farm as far as the site. I understand that up and down St. Martin Road is probably a place where it's be seen a lot, looking down on it. In all good conscience, I can't make a motion to approve this, so I am making a motion that we deny zoning ordinance 18-11.
Got a motion to deny the rezoning request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second from Commissioner Morgan. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a comment. I spent a lot of time with this package over the weekend, looking up websites about hazards that solar farms might have. First of all industries, regardless of what kind they are, have hazards. I did look up to see if there were any deaths caused because of a solar farm, and the only death that I could find that had anything to do with a solar farm was there was a worker that was killed not by the solar farm but by a trencher that somehow he got underneath the trencher and he was killed. It wasn't because of the solar farm. I think farmers know that there's all kinds of risk when it comes to agriculture. I mean, there's farmers that have been caught in grain bins and probably have been killed. There's farmers that have been caught by tractors that do turn over, and I can speak personally about that. I have had a tractor to turn over, and I'm lucky I didn't get killed. But saying that, solar farms are here. They're the future of some green electricity. I do think, from what I hear, we need to improve our zoning issues when it comes to solar farms, especially the requirement to tear one down. I do think that we also need to determine how much land we're going to allow solar farms to be placed in Stanley County. I don't want Stanley County to be known as the solar capital of North Carolina. I do think we do need our fair share of those, but we do need to determine how much land should be appropriated. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Lyle and Commissioner Morgan.
I'd just like to, I guess, explain why I'm against this at this time. Me and Commissioner Swain both went out to Mr. Presley's house on Sunday, and I can tell you the view, he would have a clear view of the solar farm. However, my biggest hesitation is losing farmland for solar. We need to find a way where we can use kind of property like in the earlier project that we approved, where that project isn't suitable for farming. We need to look at spots like that. Also, I did have hesitations too. Secondly, is we've already approved the large tract, and I believe that I don't know how else to explain this well, I guess you should have done better homework on this property. When you come to us back in, when was it, May or June? I just don't feel that y'all did enough research, and makes me question now with these two properties, is this going to be enough? Are y'all going to come back for more once you go out? And I just wanted to explain, I do understand some of the hesitations with some of the other property owners. I've had questions about the decommissioning as well. Personally, I would like to see a bond of some type. There's too many startup companies in this country that go out of business. And we're talking 20, 30 years from now, so who's to say your investors up and leave or run out? Eventually that could either come back to the landowners, and if they can't afford it, if something happens, eventually it could come back to the county. That's just a personal, that's not stance from anybody else here. But at this time, I just wanted to explain why I'm against it. I am for property rights. I do think every property owner has his right to do what within the laws of his property, but I can't support this at this time, knowing what we've already approved in the past.
Any other comments? Commissioners? We do. We have a motion from Vice Chairman McIntyre, second from Commissioner Morgan. All those in favor to not approve this zoning request signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed to not approve this? Motion carries 7-0. The request has been denied.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Swain.
before we move forward, I would like to make another motion. I move to propose a moratorium on solar farms not less than 12 months, and not to include residential projects to power individuals' own homes, and not to include corporate projects to power on-site corporate entities, if that makes sense.
I think I understand the motion. Does the board understand the motion? The way the chair understands the motion is there to be a 12-month moratorium on solar-powered systems, but not to include residential systems on residential homes and corporate systems on corporate businesses.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Eford had a question. I'll address that. I think, I agree, and I'm a property rights advocate, and really that's why I approved the first roughly 400 acres of this project. And as of Saturday morning, I was all about this. Then I kept reading this package, and and going over it, and things just kind of changed in my head. I went and visited some different property owners over the weekend. I know Saturday somebody probably could have called the sheriff's department for stalking or whatever, because I think I drove up and down Sides Road in Old Aquadale 5 or 6 times with the boys. I think it does deserve some more study. Personally, I would like to see one of these projects done under our zoning ordinances to see what it looks like. Now, whether that's going to happen in 12 months or not, I kind of doubt. But I would like to see what it looks like. You know, can we go to that 400 acres and see that our buffers are adequate or inadequate? We've got 2 large projects. We've got some small projects. We voted on nearly 1,000 acres since I've been a commissioner in 2 years, and I've yet to see a solar panel put in. So that's kind of where I got to going, what is this going to look like? So my reasoning behind this was to potentially take a break from this and let's see what it's going to look like. See if some of these projects come to fruition and we can look at it. That was just my reasoning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Swain. Commissioner Lawhon?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the zoning department, I know we've approved several projects, some in Richfield, some smaller solar farms, maybe 40-acre solar farms. Have those been completed?
Good evening, Ms. Lawhorn. As Commissioner Swain mentioned earlier, none of them have been built, other than the ones that you see actually on the ground. On 49, there's been one built, and one on Hatley Road in Oak Pearl. Those are smaller projects, probably the first ones we've encountered. But we do have several other projects been approved that have not started construction or been approved by Duke Energy that we're aware of.
Would you be kind enough to have somebody in the zoning department take some of us commissioners to see some that have been completed, even though they may be small? I would like to physically go and look at the ones in Stanley County.
We'd be glad to anytime.
And I would ask that our zoning department arrange it, and any commissioner that wants to go, I would hope they would go.
Sure.
Thank you.
We do.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Swain?
Apparently, I have made a motion that is not germane this evening. I will withdraw my motion as it was stated and move to direct county staff to figure out how we can implement a moratorium on solar production.
So you have withdrawn your original motion and moved to direct staff to look at ways for the county to implement a moratorium. I've got a motion from Commissioner Swain, a second from Commissioner Louder. Any discussion on that from the board? All those in favor of Commissioner Swain's motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries 6-1.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman McIntyre.
I would make a motion respectfully to table items 4C and D, as it's come to our attention that there are other folks that might want to be considered for those posts. So I would respectfully make that motion.
All right, got a motion to table C and D to the next meeting. Do we have a second? Second from Commissioner Louder. Any discussion? I think that's the appointments. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries 6-1. All right. Got item 5, Department of Health and Human Services presenter, Mr. David Jenkins. Good evening, David. I'll take a brief moment. Thank you, everyone who attended our meeting. It's not often that we see everyone here.
No, you stay right here. Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for your time this evening. As you're well aware, Stanley County has been in the news lately for negative reasons relating to substance misuse, so we're happy to bring some positive news this evening on this subject matter. With the assistance of EMS staff, we were able to secure a grant. Public Health was able to secure a grant in the amount of nearly $100,000 to help address this serious issue in our community. So Chris and I plan to keep it really brief for you, go over a few strategies, a few measures and goals this evening. So Chris is going to kick us off.
We like brief.
Good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies. How are you? We've worked diligently with the Stanley County Health Department, and we've all lost sleep over trying to get this grant together, trying to combat this opioid issue. We've come up with a plan to implement a community paramedicine program that'll go to the heart of the problem from when someone does overdose and they have their life-saving intervention, that we can direct peer services and the community paramedic themselves in conjunction with the health department of getting these folks some help and trying to get them off the drugs. We've worked really hard on this grant. And we're going to provide patient follow-up, conduct physical and mental health assessments in the field. We could do medical clearance in the field to get them away from the ERs where they're getting frustrated and move them into a mental health environment. We're going to educate them. We're also going to connect the patients to primary care as well as mental health and peer support. Anything else, Jay?
Sure. I believe you have most of the slides in your packet. I think I added one. Just a little timeline. We've got a short turnaround for this project. A lot of work to do. Just wish us luck that we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. I'm not going to go through all this, but we have a plan laid out working in conjunction with EMS. Let's go to our budget. Let's see. Budget here, that's the most important. Again, $99,808.97. We'll be asking you all to approve to accept these funds this evening. We were one of 22 counties out of 100 counties in the state, so we were just one of a few that got selected for this grant. So we're pretty excited about that. $51,000 for two community paramedics, the boots on the grounds folks, the EMTs, paramedics will be working with patient follow-up and connecting them for care. Peer support services will be contracting for these services, about almost $40,000 for that. Substance Use Coalition, we're trying to hire a health educator, and a portion of that salary will be paid from this grant to help coordinate a lot of these efforts. Sharps containers and disposals, a small amount there for that. Fentanyl test strips, as you're aware, if some of these drugs being used, if they have fentanyl, chances are much higher the individual overdose. So this is another means to provide to raise awareness for those that are in need of help, that haven't got the help they need at the time, to kind of prevent deaths in this county associated with substance misuse. And peer support specialist training for some of our partners. Measures, pretty easy. Overdoses, folks completing detox or treatment, referrals to peer support, and referrals to behavioral health. And our goals basically is reduce emergency department visits, reduce overdoses, therefore reducing deaths associated with this, and improving the length of life and quality of health in Stanley County, quality of life in Stanley County, that's important. Any business from an economic standpoint that moves here, family wanting to move here is going to look at the quality of life, length of life in the community. So ways we can improve that by tackling this tough issue is definitely going to improve the livability of Stanley County. So, and we said we'd keep it brief, so that's our presentation for this evening. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer those now at this time.
Andy.
David, thank you. I know Finance worked on the budget amendment, but the budget amendment doesn't appear to line up specifically with the items you discussed in the presentation. The budget amendment doesn't have well, the budget amendment, first of all, is just for the first year, which is $70,000.
Yes, sir.
That doesn't appear to line up with any new additional staff. And so I know it has professional services, education materials, training, and other utility expenses, but it doesn't have staff. And so help me understand that gap.
Contract standpoint is what we were looking at, contracting for those folks. So
these aren't going to be, you're not hiring these folks, you're just simply contracting with paramedics?
Was that your intention, Chris?
Contracting with paramedics?
No, what I'm saying is the budget amendment that was prepared by Finance doesn't align with what's in the presentation in terms of staffing. And that's what I'm trying to get a handle on is Are you proposing to hire 2 new paramedics, or are we talking about contracting for paramedic services? If we're going to hire 2 new paramedics, then board needs to table this budget amendment this evening and wait until November 19th to do it, because the budget amendment doesn't line up with this presentation in terms of what you're asking for in terms of that.
Right, Mr. Lucas. What we plan on doing in the initial startup is start our training, and we're going to try to run this from the trucks, the paramedics that are existing.
Andy, I hope that answered your question there. I know from the health side, it was definitely going to be contracted, so.
Right, and I understood that, but when I saw the presentation in the budget amendment, it didn't jive, and so I wanted to make sure that we aren't proposing to hire any new staff at this point in time. That this is going to be completely either contractual services, training, education, supplies, and that nature. I want to make sure before the board takes any action on this, I don't want to have to come back and have them do something else that undoes something they've already done. So that's what I'm trying to prevent.
We're going to use the existing personnel we have. Mike said that would be mine. Mike said that would come. Sorry. He prepared me.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Swain.
I have a quick question. Would the use of 2 of our current paramedics take away from paramedics we keep in the field?
They would actually do it on not their downtime. It would be the ones that we select to try and come in on their off time to do it if they would like to do that.
All right, thank you, sir.
Any other comments, questions from the board? What's the pleasure of the board?
Chairman, I make a motion that Stanley County term 1, physical year 18-19, Daily South, $304.53.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, folks.
Commissioner Lawhon, I think we need a motion also for the actual budget amendment itself. So moved. Got a motion from Commissioner Lawhon, second from Commissioner Louder. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. There we go. Motion carries 7-0. All right, item B, Department of Health and Human Services Board appointments.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate the following positions. I'd like to nominate Ms. Shirley Louder to move from general public to the nursing position. Nominate Jan Louder be appointed as a general public member. Appoint Ms. Nancy Smoke, nominate Ms. Nancy Smoke, Michael Williams, and Joy Teal to the consumer member positions that we have. Those are my nominations.
Let me make sure I get that right. Shirley Louder to the vacated nurse position. Jan Louder to the public member.
Yep.
Also, Nancy Smoke, consumer.
Michael Williams, consumer.
Joy Teal.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Eford.
would it be possible, Vice Chairman McIntyre, to break that out and do the general public member vacated with the nurse's position and then do the 4 consumers?
I'm just nominating the folks I want to nominate for those positions.
Go ahead, and if you've got someone else you'd like to nominate, go ahead.
No, I'm good with that. I just, if you was gonna vote on them, I'd like to, vote on the two positions separately. No, I'm okay with that.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lawhon?
Dr. Joan Udi and Shirley Louder, the two, one of those two are going to be the registered nurse member. Will Dr. Joan Udi still remain on the board?
Yes. Whichever one you want those to remain.
Okay, thank you.
Any other nominations?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a nomination. I just have a question.
Okay. Commissioner
And maybe I missed this. So, Ms. Daniels is moving, and Commissioner McIntyre is recommending for Shirley Louder for her position, and Ms. Udi would stay on as a consumer or
Stay in general public. She would stay in her current position.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You don't have to right now. You can do that later. Right. Are there any other nominations at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Dr. Joan Udi, and I'm okay with the other four.
Are you going to nominate?
Commissioner McIntyre
You're nominating Joan Udi
for the designated
for the nurse position. All right, well, I guess we will first take a vote on the designated nurse position. So I've got two nominees. I've got Shirley Louder and Joan Udi. Commissioners in favor of Shirley Louder, if you will, just raise your hands.
Mr. Chairman, before the county attorney, how do we determine who's replacing who as far as the consumers because somebody's staying? There's 4 on the board right now. Yeah, and we're replacing 3, so who's the 4th staying if we're replacing 3?
There's actually, one of them didn't want to be reappointed, so Paige Emerson.
From my understanding, you've got 4 open positions, and there has been 3 individuals nominated for those 3 positions. That's, okay, county manager confirmed that's correct. So we've actually got we've got one less name than what we could have. Correct. So I guess we'll take the vote on the nurse position. And if you will, to show your hand so that I can count. Those in favor of Shirley Louder, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 4, 5. Okay, those in favor of Joan Udi, raise your hand. Okay, 2 to 5, so Ms. Louder will be appointed as her nurse position. I guess those in favor of Jan Louder to serve as the general public member, and Nancy Smoke, Mr. Williams, and Joy Teal to serve as consumers. You will raise your hand. Got 7 votes there. Okay. So that means Ms. Udi will continue to serve in her current position. Everybody get that? All right.
I think the only question you have left is which consumer is still on the board technically until they're replaced and/or reappointed? That's the question. Which consumer is, you replaced 3 of the 4 consumers. So which consumer is still on the board until they are replaced or reappointed? That's really the question that you have, the board still has to address. Because one member's still technically on the board until they're replaced or reappointed, because they can continue to serve until they're replaced or reappointed. So I think we just need to be able to address that.
Well, I think the board has not made any direction as to replace anyone. So all those members' term has expired, and so therefore they're coming off.
Even though a member's term expires, they always continue to serve until they're either reappointed or replaced. And so they're still serving. 3 of them aren't because they've been replaced. One of them still is. And so the board needs to determine who that is so that we can give proper direction to Health and Human Services staff to be able to manage that board.
I need a name.
I'll make a motion that we keep Boyd Honeycutt on for the time being.
Either you can say that Boyd Honeycutt is the individual who hasn't been replaced. His term's expired, but he hasn't been replaced or reappointed, and you're just going to let it ride at this point. Or you'll have to make a motion to reappoint him, which will be for a 4-year term.
Commissioner Morgan, you want to make a motion that Boyd Honeycutt remain in that position until he is replaced or reappointed?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. And I got a second from Commissioner Louder. Any discussion? Been a long evening. All right, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Okay. Everybody good with that? County Manager, you're...
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear because Health and Human Services has to send notice of that. So he's been the one who's been identified as terms expired. His term is expired, but he will continue to serve until he's reappointed.
Correct. All right, item 6, update on design, build, and RFQ for the new EMS facility. Thank you, EMS staff, for staying with us tonight.
It's probably built by now, right?
Thank y'all for y'all's patience.
Hey, folks, I appreciate this opportunity. You've got the letter that was prepared, and just to highlight some of the updates, you know, the RFQ was sent out in September. We got 3 bids back in October. One, Bobbitt Construction out of Raleigh, DR Reynolds out of Starr, and Stokes out of Stanley County. All of them were great. They were very competent, very experienced in the commercial construction industry. Very credible resumes. So what we did, it was myself, Mike Smith, our EMS manager, Todd Louder, our facilities director. We used a points-based selection criteria that identified knowledge and experience with the design-to-build concept with a fire EMS style facility. Looked at past history of building in Stanley County, their approach, our objectives, and our schedules, and their qualifications. And after we scored them, DR Reynolds came out on top. And you know, with their design options that we've been able to look at with our team, I think we can build a pretty neat building. And so I'm just wanted to give you an update to see if you had any questions, but just looking for that green light to move forward with our recommendations of Reynolds, which is those initial conversations.
Thank you, Brian. County Manager.
I'll say something real quick. The board actually appropriated funds so that what we can do is we'll contract with this design build contractor. They will come up with they will program the facility and they will come up with a budget. But we won't move forward with the construction until you are comfortable with it, whatever that budget is. So you feel comfortable either using fund balance or taking on debt or whatever, however we decide, or any combination thereof. So all we're authorizing at this point is them to move forward with the design, which we have sufficient funds to cover that in the existing budget. And that's why you're not seeing a budget amendment this evening. With that, we just need approval to move forward and
have those conversations
and to execute a contract for the design services with this design build contractor.
Got a motion from Commissioner Lawhon, second from, which one? Commissioner Swain, I couldn't tell. Any other comments, questions, debate from the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate all y'all do. Item 7, Utilities. Donna Davis, Utilities Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I want to briefly present for you this evening the award of the Palestine Water Pump Station construction contract bid. We did put that project out to bid, and unfortunately for competition's sake, we only received one bid. We put it out again for an additional period of time, and a second time, we only received the one bid. So at this point, having gone through the process and not having any other bids, we are requesting that we award the contract in the amount of $1,128,801 for the construction of the Palestine Water Pump Station to the lowest responsive bidder, NJR Group of Albemarle, North Carolina.
Who is NJR Group?
They are a company that has been around, according to our engineer, they've been around for several years, and they are an offshoot of R.J. Russell and J.T. Russell, I'm sorry. J.T. Russell, I'm sorry. It has been a long night. And their company, and they have done some very professional work for other organizations in the county, in the area.
Very good. Just new name. Hadn't seen that.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Davis.
Yes, sir.
Do you know who the principals of that business?
I do not know.
Is that Nathan? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Swain.
I'd just like to point out, is the actual sheet incorrect, or is this sheet correct? The numbers are slightly different, only by $9, but, you know, auditors love small mistakes.
That, in all likelihood, was a typo. It's probably supposed to be a 10 instead of 01. I am very sorry about that.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure we were right. Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Eford.
I would make a motion we approve the Palestine Water and Pump Station to the lowest possible bidder, NJR Group of Albemarle.
Got a motion from Commissioner Eford, second from Vice Chairman McIntyre. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 7.
Chairman, I make a motion to approve the budget amendment 2019-18.
Got a motion from Vice Chairman McIntyre, second from Commissioner Morgan. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Sue's still waiting in the car.
Thank you very much.
I make a motion we approve the consent agenda approved as presented.
Motion from Vice Chairman McIntyre, second from Commissioner Swain. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Public comment. I had some folks sign up, but I think it was in regards to the solar stuff. Is there anyone that wished to speak during our public comment? Any member of the public wish to speak? If not, I'll start with the board. Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Lawhon, Vice Chairman McIntyre, Commissioner Swain, Commissioner Eford.
Just one quick one, and I'll get you out of here. This weekend is Veterans Day, and a lot of things going on. Oakburr will be hosting the Veterans Day Parade. Thank you for your service will be the 14th, and on the Tuesday, November 13th, there'll be a free veterans breakfast at Atrium Health at the hospital, 7:30 until. That's all.
Commissioner Louder. I would just, short comment, just encourage anyone listening, anyone here to please go and vote tomorrow if you have not. A lot of men and women have lost their life to give us that right. So please exercise your right to vote. I don't care which way you do it. I've got my opinions, but please just go do it. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All right. Yeah.